Hey everybody, Chad Shoop here, and look, I'm excited today because we're going to be breaking down one of my top performing stock trading strategies. Look, this is one that I've used for years now, and I really think I'm only starting to perfect it. But hey, I'm a student of the stock market, I'm always learning, but this is the most exciting stuff that I'm seeing right now, and we're going to break it down to a very basic level today so you can understand how this strategy works. But right now, what I want you to know is that you can click right up here to where you can join me and get more trades like this throughout the year, other hand-picked trades from some of my top strategies. I've spent over a decade basically developing profitable strategies in the stock market. Now I have one service, and you can click on it up here down below to learn how to join us, but one service that every single week we're going to take a hand-picked trade out of those strategies and deliver it to you. So it's a cheap service, way to get a ton of trades throughout the year. We're talking about at least one a week at the minimum that you're going to get throughout the year of these hand-picked trades. And this strategy that I'm showing you today is one of the top trades that I've been placing and that we've been making profits on. So look, stay tuned in, stay glued to what I'm going to show you, but click the link, learn how to join us over on Bank It or Tank It Elite. That's what it's called, my elite trading service. Be sure to check that out by clicking the links up top or down below, and look, like and subscribe to my channel. Make sure you don't miss out. Click the bell so you get notified and everything else. So let's dive right into this. I want to talk about my Slingshot trading strategy. It's one of my favorite approaches to use, and it incorporates the two biggest, market-driven indicators that are going to help you generate profits, and that's momentum, that's the speed of a move. That's what you want to track here to figure out whether things are breaking out or falling lower. And then relative strength, that's outperformance to a central index to figure out if you're actually beating the market or underperforming the market. And then those trends tend to stick over a certain period of time depending on how you're looking at the chart. So today we're going to dive into this top concept, and it's called slingshot trades. I like to call them slingshot trades. It stuck with me, and I want to explain it to you today the same way that helps it make sense for me today. And really, everybody thinks of a slingshot as the thing you pull back and let go as a kid, and it shoots off to the moon. Those are almost more like moonshots to me. What I'm talking about with slingshot almost comes back to, just from a mental standpoint of how to think about this, comes back to this more of a space approach. How astronauts are able to travel around planets, how the planetary system really works with gravitational pulls around planet systems that are basically help some of the travel. They use these to slingshot around the moon. It's that's kind of the phrase that it comes from. But meteoroids, all these other things also slingshot around planets, and you see it a lot in sci-fi movies more so. But that's the bigger gist of this concept, is that we want to drill in from the big broad market. That's the S&P 500. So that's the biggest basically system in our universe. And then we want to break out to the 11 sectors that we're going to be tracking inside of that. So the 11 sectors kind of act as the planets. They're rotating around this, and we want to piggyback on those when they're expected to make the move from basically underperformance to outperformance. That's the long and short of it. And then inside that sector, we want to jump in and find the stock that's set to make the biggest move within the sector. So we're drilling down 3 levels here to find the top stock, and we're going to do that today as I show you exactly how this system works and what I do to try to find these top stocks when I recommend a slingshot trade. So we're going to start with the bigger picture here. These are the big sectors in the S&P 500. So we have the XLY, the consumer discretionary sector, the XLP, the consumer staples sector, XLRE, real estate, the K is for technology, I for industrials, F for financials, XLB's material sector, XLV's healthcare, U for utilities, and then E for energy. Now I have this starting back. This is June 2022. I just picked a random date so I can move it forward. And so we can watch how they basically have this clockwork-like rotation around the center. The center of this map that we're looking at, this chart, is the S&P 500. We want to see, relatively speaking, how these 10 or 11 sectors, whatever I want to throw on this chart, it could be the individual stocks, whatever it is, we're looking at their performance relative to the S&P 500. Nothing else matters. They're looking at, for this chart, you could have just the XLY on here, and it's only looking at its performance relative to this. So you can do it, isolate it one at a time. I like to throw a lot on here so that way I can see where they are in this rotation, because you'll you'll see as we slide across here that the general rotation is clockwork, moving from wherever quadrant they're in, moving in a clockwise rotation. So if they're in the improving quadrant, you expect them to go to leading next. And then once they get into the leading quadrant, you expect them to fall lower and weaken. And then from weakening, they're going to go to lagging. And then once they're in lagging, you expect them to turn around and start to improve again, and then continue to repeat the cycle. And the cycle really is the mix between relative strength and momentum. So leading the market or lagging the market is basically the relative strength. You're either outperforming the market or underperforming. So that's where those two come in. And then the momentum down here, you're weakening or you're improving. So the way that this chart works, the relative rotation graph, it takes the relative strength of these indexes or stocks or whatever it is you want to throw in here to that underlying core index. So if it could be the S&P 500, which it is in this case, or it could be any other stock that I want to throw on there. So in this case, we're looking at the relative strength to the S&P 500, and then it takes the momentum of that relative strength to basically start to create this rotation that we're seeing here in this chart. So that's building in those two key factors to the two key factors that you want to follow in the stock market, and that's momentum and relative strength to the top performing indicators for looking for profits. So that's what we're tracking. This is what we want to follow. So as we go across here, you can just see that there's this natural flow, definitely a clockwise rotation that they continue to grow through. This is a daily chart, so every other week or so, you're seeing a major rotation in these stocks as they continue to move around. Now, with that said, knowing that these stocks tend to go from lagging to improving, then to leading, that's where you can see these bigger moves on the actual price charts. As long as the S&P 500 is doing its thing and holding up or heading higher, because there's a way that if the S&P 500 is going down, you can still be leading the market and not actually be going higher. You're just outperforming the stock market. But in general, knowing that that's the rotation, then you want to find the stocks or sectors that are down here, they're beaten down, they're in the lagging quadrant, and then bank on this rotation playing out for the rotation to where they'll finally start to improve and then get into the leading quadrant before they start to weaken. So you'd like to sell once they're in the leading quadrant. And sometimes there's breakouts and all that. We use these on the charts. That's the color-coded charts that I use. So that way I can kind of have this understanding of where they are on a chart like this. But the Slingshot trade is specifically focusing on the sectors, and then we would dive into the sector itself. So in this case, and this is January 27th, that's as of the close on the 27th, and that was Friday. So we have these stocks that are down here and starting to make this rotation to the upside. So just to focus on one, let's take utilities. The utility sector is down here. It's the last one that's looking to start to make this rotation. So basically, over the next couple of days, you want to go long utilities for about a week or so, short-term trades, because we are looking at the daily relative rotation graph. If you go to the weeklies, then you want it to, it'll last a couple of months. And if you go to the monthlies, then you're talking about half a year or more for these moves to play out. So on a daily, though, we're looking at a quick move here on utilities to outperform. Now we want to dive into the utility sector. So now we have our S&P 500 as the center of the universe. We have the utility sector set to kind of whip around here, slingshot around, if you will, the rotation around the center of the universe, around the S&P 500, because it's getting so far out, it tends to see more volatility, and then it's going to slingshot and come right back in. And that's going to kind of give you the whip for the big performance that we want to see. But we also want the best stock to trade. So let's pull up the utility sector on a chart like this. So here we have the daily relative rotation graph for the S&P 500. Now, I want to show you something first. Let's scroll back. This is you can go back about a year. So let's go back again, and I want to roll through this just to give you an idea of how the rotations are going. So in this chart that we are looking at, these are the utility stocks with the S&P 500 on the center of the chart. And we're going to look at how they're going through the motions on this graphic. So as we scroll here down the way, you'll notice that they're almost like schools of fish. These individual stocks compared to the S&P 500, I mean, there we got a couple that went way away. CEG came back in. AES is kind of leading the utilities there, but I mean, you can see that there's a good core of them, all through here. It's like a little pack of fish or whatever, something like a herd just moving there. And the same motions all the way through this, even though they're individual stocks and they're supposed to have their individual characteristics and trading styles, they are for the most part just aligned with how the utility sector is trading relative to the S&P 500. So to get a better sense, because that's not telling us too much, because we know that these are all going to generally make the same move. So it's harder to tell from a chart like this, especially as we get into stuff like the tech sector and where they have a few more stocks. It's going to be a little harder to clarify. So to get the best trade here, we want to make this centered around the utility sector. So I'm going to pull that up real quick. Now we're looking at the same set of stocks, the utility stocks, but at the center of this chart is the utility sector. So now we are getting basically 2 or 3 layers deep, because we have the S&P 500. Let's say we're expecting it to move higher over the next week. Then we know that the utility sector is set to outperform the S&P 500 over the next week or so. Then we want to find the stock in the utility sector that's set to outperform the utility sector itself. So that's the slingshot effect that you're building on there, from one major system getting the gravitational pull around the S&P 500, improving, and then we want to go around that and slingshot around that individual sector with a better performance in the stock. So stocks tend to be more volatile, so you tend to see bigger gains in them anyways. And the way that we are setting this up, you're looking for them to make bigger runs. So in this one, you want to find a stock that's down here, making this whip higher, making this move to the upside. So there's a couple in our favor. We have Eversource Energy, we have Evergy, we have DTE Energy, and then we have Southern Company. So looking at kind of these 4 right here, I like to see them either making this turn to where they're already pointing northeast on this chart, which Southern Company is, so that's a nice one to look at, or ES, which Eversource, which is basically how we were at in the utility sector anyways. You might want to give it a couple of days here early in this week, but it's one that's about to make a big move higher to the upside as it starts to improve and lead this overall market. So Southern Company, though, we take a look at the price chart, just to pull this one up. And it's hard to ignore this day, but this was just a funny day in the market where they had some bad fills, and it gave you this big wide spread. But we see that, so this stock is coming off a little bounce back down here. They're in the lagging quadrant. This is relative to the S&P 500 now, these colors. So you can see that this stock is trending around a low point that it typically sees, and it typically sees it while it's in the lagging quadrant. So we've seen this a couple times. It bottom in the lagging quadrant and start to move out of it. So right now, Southern Company, nice strong buy here, looking for this thing to continue to move higher. You don't want it to fall back below $66 a share, but as long as it can stay above that, this would be a great slingshot stock to look at to outperform the utility sector in the S&P 500 over the next week or so. So that's it. That's the gist of this slingshot trading strategy that I use. I basically constantly monitor the sector's relative rotation around the S&P 500. And from there, I'm looking for big moves, and then I just start to drill in. We're looking at the sector, looking at the stocks within the sector, and then looking at the price charts of the stocks to see what key trends, what key levels that we want to watch in these companies. So that's the big backdrop that goes into any of my slingshot trades that I recommend. So today, that's a great one. Southern Company, keep an eye on that stock. Great buying opportunity now. Keep a tight stop on it. Just look for it to make a move to the upside here over the next week or so. So that's it. And look, just remember, folks, if you liked this strategy, if you like the concept behind it and want more trades and want more guidance on it, look, sign up below. I have a link that you can join to a membership that's going to give you a lot of trades like this throughout the year. Definitely handpicked trades that I find similar to this that I'll drill into, and it has several things going for it. If you want those types of trades in your life, you want to sign up below, or you can click up here and get more details on that service and how to sign up and join me over there in my Bank It or Tank It Elite. That's what it's called. So be sure to check that out. That's all for today. Until next time, I'm Chad Shoup.